یار جا چرانگت خزانه سبز و ناز میآید مرهم راز میآید نخور خواستی خداوند مهربانم سبز و ناز میآید مرهم راز میآید میانی ما و تو عهد و نشانه سبز و ناز میآید مرهم راز میآید حالا یار جان خطر دارد جدایی سبز و ناز میآید مرهم راز میآید سبز و ناز میآید مرهم راز میآید سبز و ناز میآید مرهم راز میآید از دل پر دردم بشنو دل به نیاز میآید از دل پر دردم بشنو دل به نیاز میآید
शहर की रोशनी जमीन दिखाए
सब्ज व नाज میآید مرهم راز میآید امید سے ہے پھر مہکی ہوائیں سبز و ناز میآید مرهم راز میآید
दरख्तों में शिफा के फूल पाए
सब्ज و नाज میآید مرهم راز میآید
नई दुनिया नया जीवन बसाए
सब्ज و नाज میآید مرهم راز میآید
सब नाज
میآید مرهم راز میآید
सब नाज में आयत महरम राज में आयत از دل پر دردم بشنو دل به نیاز می آید از دل پر دردم بشنو دل به نیاز می آید بیا के सीने را सहराब साजन
سبز و ناز میآید مرهم راز میآید
بیا के دید را دریا بسازن
سبز و ناز میآید مرهم راز میآید
بیا تا بستری از پر بسازن
سبز و ناز میآید مرهم راز میآید یکی خانه ز عشق از سر بسازم سبز و ناز میآید مرهم راز میآید
सब नाज में आयत महरम राज में आयत सब नाज में आयत महरम राज में आयत از دل پر دردم بشنو دل به نیاز می آید از دل پر دردم بشنو دل به نیاز می آید از دل پر دردم بشنو دل به نیاز می آید از دل پر دردم بشنو دل به نیاز می آید
have riddled me a case of self-doubt, and you did it with the keys to my house. In the warmth of a darkened state, I remain my image on a higher ground. Betrayal brought the shadow of night, where I focused my creative light. And though I sat for a year in debris, now I'm free of the shackles on my wrists and sight. I had to find another way to see a better day. I stand not alone, building bricks in my bones. There's music here with me, a mountain to climb, a steep state of mind. I'm taller than a dream and a fragmented team. There's music in my life. And I still love you. It's just a matter of time. Yes, I still love you. It's just a matter of time. I only wanted your love, your loyalty. Your eyes betray you. You know what you did. My heart is broken, must rise above this. No way but forward. A move in love, yes. And I still love you. It's just a matter of time. Yes, I still love you. It's just a matter of time. Kaeni kwa amani.
موز بالایم بالا میروم، موز دریایم دریا میروم. موز بالایم بالا میروم، موز دریایم دریا میروم. ما از آنجا و از اینجا نیستم، ماز به جایم و به جا میروم. راه یک تنگ است چون سمخول هیات، ما نشان رشته یک تا میرویم. برای اختنگ است چون سمخولیات ما نشان رشته یک دام ربه
I was concerned that much of the building that was taking place in the Islamic world had lost its sense of direction. There was a hiatus in cultural continuity. There was a lack of clarity and precision in the educational institutions that were forming the young architects of the future. I profoundly believed that architecture is not just about building, it is a means of improving people's quality of life. At its best, it should mirror the plurality of cultural traditions and the diverse needs of communities, both urban and rural. At the same time, it must employ modern technologies to help fulfill desirable aspirations for the future. I am also concerned that there is still too little attention being paid to design for communities to protect residents from the effects of earthquakes, many of them in remote rural areas. 2 million people died as a result of earthquakes in the last century, and 100 million were severely affected. There are vast populations that live in seismic-sensitive high mountain areas where we must focus attention. And the massive devastation of the Indian Ocean's tsunami has taught us a terrible lesson that the destructive power of earthquakes can reach far beyond the initial disturbance. It will no doubt lead to new thinking and new approaches towards seaside construction. So we are by no means at the end of our task. To quote Churchill, we may be at the end of the beginning.
Yali Madid, welcome and bienvenue. My name is Hus Madabji, and welcome to Friday Night Reflections. FNR! Yeah! Bit of a Guns N' Roses fan. I'd like to extend a special welcome to all our Jamaati members, our multi-faith family members, and everyone tuning in from across the country and around the world. I hope you had a wonderful week and enjoyed last week's episode featuring a few of the multi-faith family members in our community. Now, we're coming to the end of May, and as you know, this time of year, many of us are usually getting ready for the World Partnership Walk, at least here in Canada. But sadly, we're not fully ready to gather in those numbers yet. But that's okay, because this month, the month of May, it's been full of celebrations. Think about it. We celebrated Mother's Day. We celebrated Eid. We celebrated Emergency Preparedness Week, EPW, and it was crazy. EPW, emergency. You didn't tell. You don't know what I'm. You're not sure what I'm. Not okay. Right. Hey, that's okay. No big deal. Don't worry. There's still time to get your last-minute emergency kits. There's still time to decorate your homes to clearly mark the exits. There's still time to trim the designated tree where your family will meet in the event of an emergency. Look, we are fortunate that in this country the risks of man-made disasters are low, and that many of us have not experienced a natural disaster that has resulted in severe loss of life. But as Maulana Hajri Imam has reminded us, that is no reason to get complacent. The risks of natural disasters are real in every part of our country, and we should be prepared and know what to do in the event of an emergency. Now it's Friday night. There's no need to be scared or panicked. We're going to do this together, and we're going to have some fun while we learn about the risks and how to prepare to ensure our family and loved ones are safe. So tonight, that is what we will do. First, we will hear from Council for Canada President Amir Ali Qasim Laka. Then, we'll start by understanding the risks of natural disasters across Canada. We'll then learn how to make an emergency kit. Well, I gave it a shot. You want to talk about a disaster? That was well, you tell me how I did. You'll see. We then will hear from a Jamaati member who had the opportunity to serve the institutions in Central Asia to develop their emergency preparedness strategies. Now, I said I'd keep this fun, so that's what we're going to do. We're going to bring back our Kahoot quiz to see how much we really know about being prepared for emergencies. So make sure you have your Kahoot app ready, or you can log on to kahoot.it, and then we'll share the access code shortly, and then we'll battle it out in our quiz. Now, normally we end with musical expressions, but tonight we'll wrap things up with Prince Ali Muhammad's first film, Close to Home, looking at the impact of the 2010 landslide in the Hunza Valley in northern Pakistan. Let us start with remarks by the President of the Council for Canada, President Amir Ali Qasim Laka.
My dear brothers and sisters, Yalimadad. Today, I want to speak about emergency preparedness and its importance for the Jamaat. Natural disasters, such as earthquakes and floods, are a reality of life. They strike without warning and can cause extensive damage. They're occurring with increased frequency due to climate change. Because these events are not routine, it is easy to forsake preparation and leave ourselves exposed. Preparation includes protecting our assets and enabling families to react quickly should a disaster occur. So, how should we prepare? First, each family needs to develop a response plan. These are the immediate steps to take when a crisis occurs. How will the family unite its members, safeguard its home, and evacuate the neighborhood? In developing our plan, we should consider the risks associated with where we live. Some regions have a long history of earthquakes. Others are vulnerable to wildfires and avalanches. All regions can experience floods, storm surges, and tornadoes. We should be familiar with emergency plans developed by our municipality, so we know what services will be available to us in an emergency. We can sign up for our city's emergency warning system and learn about its early warning signals. We have been sharing specific information by municipality with the Jamaat through our digital platforms. We are requesting the Jamaat to please review this information. Second, we need to protect our property and businesses. It has taken many decades for our Jamaat to settle, build our houses, businesses, and infrastructure that have become our foundation in Canada. Without protective measures, we can put ourselves at risk of losing this foundation. We should think of the most important assets we own and how we will protect them. Every family should consider adequate insurance coverage. homeowners in high-risk zones should evaluate the need for earthquake and flood insurance. We cannot assume that we are covered for these risks. Every policy is different, and we won't know until we check with our broker and evaluate the premium. This is equally important for investment and commercial properties. Finally, we have to arrange business interruption insurance to support our businesses through a crisis. For many decades, our beloved Hazrat Imam has been encouraging prudent and forward thinking on emergency preparedness. The institutions are available to work with you to ensure your readiness. Let us work together to protect our loved ones and preserve the wealth that we have worked so hard to build. My dear brothers and sisters, on a separate matter, the Jamaati institutions, in collaboration with external partners, have been developing some exciting training programs for our Jamaat to transition into growth careers of the future. These are short, 3 to 4 month courses that can lead to rewarding career opportunities with some of Canada's largest employers. The career pathways include IT, data, security analysis, digital marketing, product management, online sales training, data visualization, to name a few examples. No prior training or experience is required. Some of the training programs are subsidized or offered at no cost, and our partners are making available dedicated seats for the Jamaat. In many instances, at the end of training, connections are made to hiring managers from fast-growing companies. We are bringing these opportunities to the Jamaat and to your attention because there are Jamaati members who are in situations where they need to look for new career options. If their job or their existing career is compromised in any way. These are excellent training arrangements, open to all, and we need to get the word out to our families and friends. Programs start in June. I also want to bring to your attention 3 other initiatives. Google is offering short certification programs that can lead to excellent careers. Please look into this. We are working in collaboration with Ryerson to offer a summer boot camp for high school students focused on soft skills, emotional intelligence, and communications. Again, look out for this. Finally, we will be launching an exciting initiative next month called 10,000 Chais. This will provide a platform for professionals, industry leaders, coaches, mentors, and mentees to connect with each other from coast to coast, one-on-one, over a 15-minute chai. This way, the Jamaat will have access to the most successful talent in the country, both professionals and entrepreneurs who make themselves available for a 15-minute chai. This will provide opportunities to leverage the incredible experience and talent of our Jamaat, to learn from each other. If you need support with respect to your employment, education, or career, these are forward-looking options to consider. Please contact our Future of Work teams and visit our website. Thank you and Khuda Hafiz.
Thank you, President Saib, for those remarks. Now I'm so excited to introduce our feature panel tonight. Each of our guests this evening has had first-hand experience leading during a natural disaster, and they have graciously agreed to share their experience with us tonight. We have Mayor Naheed Nenshi with us. He's the mayor of Calgary and has been since 2010. In 2013, as Southern Alberta experienced the worst flooding in the province in history, Mayor Nenshi led the emergency management team and ensured that people had the information they needed to stay safe. We also have Samir Munji with us. He's the president of the Council for British Columbia. In 2015, just a few weeks into his appointment, a major windstorm affected the greater Vancouver area, causing widespread damage and requiring a response from the Jamaati institutions. And we also have Aisha Rajwani. She was a senior program officer with Focus Humanitarian Assistance Canada. During the 2013 ice storms that impacted southern Ontario, Aisha led the Focus team's response to ensure that Focus and the Jamaati institutions could respond to the needs of the community. Please welcome our panel. Thank you so much for joining us today on another edition of Friday Night Reflections. So let's just get right into it. Aisha, I want to talk to you right now, just as being a part of Focus. Can you tell me a little bit about your experience working with natural disasters here in Canada?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much. In 2013, Eastern Canada was hit with a massive ice storm and snowstorm. And picture this scenario. Freezing rain across the region, sub-zero temperatures, high winds, all coupled together to take down trees, downed power lines, all of this creating havoc on an electrical distribution grid. And across Eastern Ontario, over 300,000 residents were affected. And they were affected because they didn't have power in their homes. Some of them for 5 hours, some of them for up to 7 days. And as an institution, we had to come together. So Focus, leadership of the Jamaati institutions in Ontario and the Council for Canada put a core team together to lead the emergency response effort during these massive ice storms. And we knew that all the planning that we had done, we had to quickly mobilize, because of those 300,000 residents, 6,000 were members of the Jamaat. And of those 6,000, 500 were highly vulnerable. And they were vulnerable because they were seniors that were living alone, seniors and others who had mobility limitations and sensory impairments. And so we really need to quickly mobilize if we had any chance of minimizing the impact to the Jamaat and creating quickly support systems to get them through what could be a very, very challenging time. And so we did a few things, and I'll share some of the things we did during that activation. Firstly, we quickly put together a monitoring and communication team that was regularly looking at Environment Canada alerts, that was fanning this out through a mass SMS system that we had set up so institutional leadership were aware of what was going on. We quickly had to establish command and control. And in emergency management, one of the best practices is establishing an emergency operations center, an EOC, that really provides command and control over an incident. We also had to activate assessment teams that would be looking at our institutional assets like our Jamaat Khanas. Do they have power? What are the access routes like? How are the parking lot conditions? And during this week of the ice storms, Jamaat Khanas were closed for the first time in a long while for all across the region. All Jamaat Khanas were closed because they didn't have power, because of the hazardous driving conditions to reach those Jamaat Khanas. And then we quickly had to put together support systems. When Don Mills Khani was confirmed to have power and to be safe, we activated a warming center in that Jamaat Khana where hot beverages and snacks were being provided at the center. We activated a call center. Jamaat was being called to check, are they safe? Do they have any support requests, whether it's health related or food assistance? And of course, we also activated a hotline where Jamaat could call in if they had any concerns. And together, this helped kind of provide that assurance and that comfort to the Jamaat that there was support there if they needed it. And finally, we had to really target our response to the seniors, those that were most vulnerable. And through a mapping exercise, we were able to see which Jamaati buildings where we had seniors in those buildings were actually mapping to the power outage zones, and we could target efforts to support those seniors. So over the course of those 4 critical days during the ice storms, volunteers delivered personally over 2,000 meals, hot beverages to these seniors over a course of 4 days. It was truly an amazing, effort. And I would have to say that for the Jamaat, This ice storm event, this crisis event, was probably the most widespread, the longest running coordinated emergency operation that the institutions had to activate during this time.
Wow, that's just impressive. Mayor Nenshi, you're in a unique position, being the mayor of a city. So it's like, this is like beyond our Jamaat. And when you're taking care of the people in in Calgary, what is that like when it comes to the natural disasters that are happening in your city?
Well, first of all, we are so lucky to have this level of community support that we have in the Jamaat, and it's pretty incredible that we have our own emergency operations center, for example. But I'll tell you, when I was first elected mayor, I was the first mayor in 30 years who had not previously served on city council. So there was a giant fire hose of orientation of all these different city managers coming to talk to me about things, and I still remember when the head of the Calgary Emergency Management Agency came to see me. And the very first thing he said was, in the history of Calgary, we have never declared a state of emergency, but you need to understand what will happen if you need to declare one. And in my brain, it was all triage, right? I was trying to learn everything at once. So as soon as I heard we have never declared one before, I probably stopped listening at that point and thought, this is something I can learn much later. So as it turns out, in the entire 136-year history of the city of Calgary, we have declared a state of local emergency exactly 3 times. And lucky me, I got to be mayor for all 3 of them. So we had to learn a lot, or I had to learn a lot, but the good news is that we had prepared for it. And that's really the theme, right? It's about preparation. You can't control a disaster. You can't control the floodwaters. You can't control the way that the fire spreads with certain limitations. But what you can do is you can be prepared. And so the previous mayor and council had actually spent on emergency preparedness. We built a brand new emergency operations center, which is probably the best in Canada, if not in the world. And the first time I ever walked into our emergency operations center was on the night of June 20th, 2013 during the flood. But it was there. And the folks who worked at Calgary Emergency Management were there. In fact, before this current pandemic, they had a pandemic plan, what we would do if we ever had a viral pandemic. And so that kind of planning really mattered. And we were also lucky in another way in that we have dealt with so many disasters in Calgary since I've been mayor. Maybe it's just me and my bad luck, but we've had floods and fires and explosions and windstorms, and of course now a global pandemic. But I remember the very first one, which was a real windstorm that was going through Calgary on a Sunday afternoon. And so we had to close down downtown Calgary because it just wasn't safe. Panes of glass were hanging from construction sites that could come crash to the ground at any moment. And in particular, we had to close the corridor where the train runs. The train runs above ground in downtown Calgary. And we had to close the corridor where the train runs because there were literally things hanging over these train stations that could crash down. And so I went down there on a Sunday evening, probably around 5 p.m. And this is one of the big things that I learned and a lesson that I've kept in mind all this time, which is emergency operations people are amazing. And emergency operations centers are amazing, but they are based on an entirely can-do attitude. They're based on the best scenario of what we can do. And so when I went downtown that day, I said, well, do you think that the train will be open in time for rush hour tomorrow morning? And the answer I got was, we're going to make it happen. And I said, that's not the question I asked, right? The question I asked was, how likely is it that it won't be open? And they said, well, we're going to try hard, but we don't know. And so I said, okay, let's tell people that. And I realized that in too many emergency operations centers, the communications function is not front and center because people are focused on solving the problem instead of on telling people what's going on. And so they said, well, we're going to keep working, and then late tonight, if we can't open it, we'll make a call at 2 or 3 in the morning. And I said, you know what, that's not good enough. Because right now across the city, you have people who are sitting down to supper, and they might be watching the news, or after supper while they're washing the dishes, they'll be watching the news, and we have to give them time to plan their day tomorrow. So we actually have to get out now and say to people, there's a high likelihood that the train won't be running for rush hour in the morning. We'll have buses, but it'll take you way longer to get where you're going. It was midterm season. for university students. And we said, so if you got an exam, you got to leave way early. You got to make other arrangements. If you're able to work from home tomorrow, can you imagine back then, if you're able to work from home tomorrow was a very big deal. And if you're able to work from home tomorrow, you should. So what happened? The train didn't run the next morning, but we didn't have any problems at all at rush hour because people had the ability to plan. And ever since then, we've had a senior communications person sit at the decision-making table in the Emergency Operations Center to make sure that we're getting the right information out at the right time.
First of all, I don't think it's bad luck at all. Just what you've done is nothing short of incredible. And then just hearing what you have done in terms of being prepared is also amazing, and a testament to your success as a mayor in Calgary. 2013 just sounded like a bad year. Like you guys were prepared in February, and then the thing happened in June, like a few months later. Can you talk a little bit about those floods that happened in Calgary?
Yeah, I mean, I have so many stories about the flood, and I've talked about it so very much, but that flooding, so one of the funny things about Calgary is where Calgary is located, just at the foot of the Rocky Mountains, means we're very close to the headwaters of our rivers. So if you're in Winnipeg, for example, and you know that there's going to be a bad seasonal springtime flood, you actually have several days to prepare because you can see the flood coming. So you might even have weeks to prepare. But in the case of Calgary, our headwaters are so close that if they start flooding, we have barely hours before that flood will hit the city of Calgary. And that's exactly what happened in 2013. There was a big rainstorm on a Thursday night in the mountains. Then the spring snowmelt hadn't happened yet. So the rain fell on the snow, causing the rivers to crest. I was actually in Toronto at the time, and I was giving a breakfast speech on this Friday morning. And during my speech, my chief of staff, who had been traveling with me, he was sitting in the front row, and he kept looking at his phone. And I was getting a bit offended. I was like, look, this is a great speech. Pay attention. And then at some point he got up and left, which he would never do. And I thought, oh boy, something bad is going on. And it's only 5 a.m. in Calgary. What's happening? So as soon as I finished my speech, he pulled me off the stage and into the back room. And I talked to the head of emergency management in Calgary, who said, listen, it's going to be bad. And I said, how bad? And he said, it'll be 5 to 7 times worse than our previous flood in 2005. And so what happened was that when those floodwaters crested, on a typical day, the Bow River, which runs through the center of Calgary, on a typical spring runoff day, will be running at 30 or 40 cubic meters per second. And it crested that night at well over 300 cubic meters per second. And so it was fast and it was deep. So that flood ended up being at the time, the largest, costliest natural disaster in Canadian history. Over $6 billion in private and public damage. It's since been surpassed by the Fort McMurray fires, which were even more expensive. So Calgary is the not-so-proud holder of the 2nd and 4th most expensive natural disasters in Canadian history. The 3rd one was the ice storm of 1998 in Ontario and Quebec. The 4th one was just this summer, and in the middle of a pandemic. I don't think anyone even remembers what happened this past summer of 2020, which is we had a terrible hailstorm hit northeast Calgary, where many members of the Ismaili community, including myself, live. I still have holes in the side of my house. And we had tens of thousands of homes damaged, some of which were uninhabitable. But let me tell you the good news. The good news is that in the Calgary floods, only one person in the city of Calgary lost her life, which is one person too many. It was the toughest funeral I've ever been to. But only, I believe the final number was 4 or 5 people across all of southern Alberta. And in the hailstorm, nobody did. And that preparedness, although we had so much damage to property, we were able to protect people's lives and health, and that's what really matters.
Wow. Thanks for sharing all of that. And I can't imagine how tough that must have been. President Saib, tell me about British Columbia.
Thanks, Hus. And again, there are several examples I could turn to, but let me go back to August 2015. The leadership at the time had been appointed nationally, locally, just a few weeks earlier. It was an appointment cycle year, July 2015. We were all appointed to our respective roles. And a few weeks later, in late August, we had severe windstorms in various parts of the Lower Mainland in British Columbia. And I remember the first call I got was to inform me that we had power outages at multiple Jamaat Khanas. And so again here, this experience taught us both the institutional preparedness side and the Jamaati preparedness side, and the importance of both. We had a relatively new council. We had individuals who had just several weeks later been oriented and had transitioned with their predecessor in understanding their respective portfolios. And all of a sudden, there was an engagement that began, including with our Jamaati Mukhi Kamariyas and Mukhiani Kamaris, because everyone was asking the question, what do I do? And that question was coming both from an institutional and Jamaati perspective, but also from a personal perspective. We knew that amongst the thousands of households in the Lower Mainland who had lost power, several hundred of those were Jamaati households. We were able to identify with our emergency operating team, we were able to identify which pockets of the Lower Mainland were being impacted. We were able to turn to institutional data to understand and reconcile through postal code information how many Jamaati families resided in those specific pockets and areas that were experiencing power outages. And that power outage in some cases lasted hours, in some cases, people will remember, lasted several days. And so our ability to then engage and harness our volunteers to reach out to those families, to ensure that they had what they needed, and if not, how we could provide support, assistance, and again, really leverage the safety nets that we have in place. Our care for the elderly team, who have a separate database of seniors, who, including those that live in isolation, and our ability again to intervene and to ensure that we were taking the steps necessary, first to communicate, as the mayor had mentioned, and the importance of that, and secondly, to then provide the support and assistance required, and third, because this lasted several days, to on a daily basis do those requisite check-ins with those individuals and families who were impacted. And then finally, on the institutional response side, again through our Property Matters team, to ensure that each of our Jamaat Khanas, each of these critical and important imamat assets were protected, were safeguarded, and where they were affected, that we were able to take the steps necessary to mitigate and to address whatever needed to be looked after. To be cliche a little bit, that saying, hindsight is 20/20, and nobody can say today that we didn't know or we weren't warned in advance. The reality is natural disasters can come in very different forms, and the universality of some of those key elements of preparedness are very compelling. So for each of us individually, each household, each family, to do their part, to make sure they've taken what frankly are easy and necessary steps to prepare, to be in that state of readiness, to be knowledgeable, and to be ready to communicate as a family, because the likelihood of everyone being at home in the living room together when a natural disaster hits is pretty low. The greater probability is you'll be in different places, including inside and outside the home environment. Similarly, on the institutional side, we won't all be together in one room, odds are, when a natural disaster occurs. And yet we have to be ready to mobilize and ready to coordinate and ready to implement and take the necessary steps and actions to protect our institutions, our families, our Jamaat in the event of and when that natural disaster happens.
Right. And it's each and every one of us. That's a really good point you just mentioned, President Saab, that like not all of us are going to be in one room. I mean, during COVID, it sounds like it. Like movie night every night, but yeah, it's like that's a very good point that each and every one of us have to be ready to go. Thank you for sharing that, and thank you to all three of you for sharing your experiences and your advice. You know, you're right. It is a natural disaster is scary, but the more ready we are, the more on top of it and in control we can be. Thank you very much to the three of you for taking your time and being with us this evening on Friday. Yalla.
Yeah, everyone. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Wow, that got real. If you didn't believe that severe natural disaster could happen here, that was a stark reminder. But as Mayor Nenshi just said, it's also a personal responsibility to make sure that we are safe. And I guess I could start, with my own emergency kit. Getting that together can't require too much preparation, right? Should be easy peasy, right? Well, here's how well I did. Okay, we're gonna do something really simple. We're gonna whip this little emergency kit together in a second. You'll see how easy it is. They just sent me this little text. It's a simple little list. Let's just go through this right now. First thing, easy peasy, an ID. Obviously, I'm gonna put it in this bag right here. Got my ID, an emergency plan, which I printed out from the Focus website. So I'm gonna put that in here. What else we got here? Some hand sanitizer, a breeze. Everyone's got this now. So hand sanitizer, that's in there. Extra keys. Extra keys, got that, I love that. Toilet paper. Yo, do you need toilet paper? I just need a roll. Okay, charger, I got a charger. Small bills, that's a good idea. Small bills, oh, this looks like this is ow, jeez Louise. Thank you, wherever that came from. Got toilet paper, that's great. I got a 50, so we need to go to the change pot to break this into smaller denominations, so let's make a mental note of that. Clothes, look at this. Got my partnership walk sweatshirt, change maker, love that. Putting that in, plus some more clothes, that's important. Some extra footwear, a bigger bag, that's gonna be important. 12 liters of water. Non-perishable food items, a can opener. I have a manual can opener, a flashlight, AM/FM radio. Who uses a radio? Extra batteries, extra scissors, a whistle. A blanket, garbage bags, duct tape. Thermometer, hearing aids. Oh, if you need hearing aids, medication, candle, matches. Okay. So, well, you see this. You see the list. That's there. Look, if you have a lot of these things, that's great. You gotta be set for a potential disaster and you gotta be safe for 72 hours, and a list like this is gonna do it for you. But if you're like me and you don't have everything, the best thing you do is you go to this website, just head on over to Focus. They've got the entire list, and they even have a link that'll send you to a place where you can just buy everything, which is what I'm gonna do right now. So, excuse me. 12 liters of water, wow, that's a lot. The order is in, it should be here in 3 business days. Let's just hope there are no emergencies before Monday, please. Well, one person who I'm sure has their emergency kit is Nashir Kamali from Edmonton. Nashir has served on TKN assignments with Focus Humanitarian Assistance in Afghanistan, Tajikistan, and Syria. Let's hear more about Nashir's work.
Well, I had no clue about emergency kits until I joined Focus. In 2007, when I received my first phone call to go to Afghanistan, I was working with TELUS as a strategic projects manager. I also had institutional experience here, but the roles that I embarked on were something totally new. For 3 years, I was executive officer for Focus Afghanistan, another 3 years as head of Focus Tajikistan, and then as a consultant with Focus in Syria. These were amazing experiences, very challenging, but I also met some wonderful people that I worked with. Focus does both long-term community-based capacity building as well as shorter-term response to crises and emergencies. In March 2009, when I was executive officer in Focus Afghanistan, that time there was a very bad drought in Afghanistan. Plus the global prices of wheat had shot up. I remember receiving a call from the UN World Food Programme for Focus to urgently help deliver food to the northern areas of Afghanistan. We delivered food to families in Darwaz which were insecure and could not survive without assistance. The Focus Crossing team took on the challenge of delivering all the food that WFP had made available. And on the day before Navroz, I remember the head of the education department coming to thank the Focus team and to acknowledge that people had received the food so they would have meals for Navroz as well as the weeks to follow. In Syria, I was one of 2 Canadians who were assigned to support the Council for Syria. The key thing was that during a crisis, especially which spans across a country, you need to have excellent coordination. And our role was to create emergency centers which would facilitate that kind of coordination, as well as people who were trained to run the Emergency Operations Center at the local level. One of the challenges was to get an old school in Al-Khawabi converted from being a disused school into an emergency operations facility. It took us 6 months, and the local team that I had supporting me was just amazing. It was a total transformation of a building that was leaking, was moldy, and they completely refreshed it and had it ready for us to use as an emergency center for training purposes, as well as for AKF and Jamaati programs, including children's camps and celebrations. One example of capacity building, empowering the community was in Tajikistan. According to the World Bank, Tajikistan is a disaster hotspot country and most vulnerable to climate change in Eurasia. With climate change, more glaciers will be melting, resulting in glacial lakes and outburst floods, or GLOFs as we call them. As part of its capacity building, Focus trains community emergency response teams, or CERTs, in the areas of first aid and search and rescue so that they can respond during a crisis. There was a village called Baroj and in Gorno-Badakhshan, and they noticed after the very heavy avalanches, very heavy snowfall, they noticed as the weather warmed up, a lake had formed above their village up in the hills. And they realized the danger because previously there was a place called Dasht which had experienced a glacial lake outburst flood where within minutes a whole village was wiped out. 25 people died. So the CERT evacuated the villagers to safe areas that Focus had previously identified. And they contacted Focus. The geologists and engineers came, and together working with the CERT, they planned a way to drain the water from that lake away from the village, so that after 10 days, the villagers were able to return to their homes. So this is a powerful example of how capacity building can help people during a crisis. What I've learned is that we all, as individuals, as families, as a community, we need to be ready for any emergency, any disaster that could hit us. The second thing I would mention is to take the opportunity, if you can, to go and serve in these places with the Focus or other agencies. to help build capacity, to bring in best practices, which will enable these people to protect themselves in the event of a disaster and to respond to disasters very effectively.
What an amazing experience. I mean, just to have a long-lasting impact in helping communities reduce their vulnerability and increase their resilience in the face of natural and man-made disasters. Nashir, thank you very much for sharing. All right, so we've been chatting about emergency preparedness for a good amount of time now. Let's see how much you know with our Kahoot quiz. To participate, all you gotta do is type in this access code right there at kahoot.it, or if you have the mobile app, just punch in that access code. Ready? Let's do this. All right, let's get started. Question 1. Tornadoes most commonly occur A, from 3 p.m. to 7 p.m., B, during tornado season of March and October, C, in Alberta, Saskatchewan, Manitoba, Southern Ontario, and Quebec, or D, all of the above. The correct answer is D, all of the above. Question 2. Canadian cities with the highest risk of earthquake, starting with the highest. Is it A, Greater Vancouver, Nanaimo, Victoria, Abbotsford, and Montreal? B, Greater Vancouver, Nanaimo, Victoria, Abbotsford, Ottawa? C, Greater Vancouver, Nanaimo, Victoria, Abbotsford, Edmonton? Or D, Greater Vancouver, Nanaimo, Victoria, Abbotsford, Saskatoon? The correct answer is A, although Ottawa is also in a seismic area just after Montreal. Question 3. Hailstorm Alley is between A, Penticton and Kelowna, B, Red Deer and High River, including Calgary, C, Kitchener and Peterborough, including Toronto, or D, Burnaby and Halifax. The correct answer is B. Hailstorm Alley is a term referring to an area of south and central Alberta where hailstorms are frequent. Question 4. Your emergency kit should include supplies to last a minimum of A, 24 hours, B, until the next presidential election, oh geez, C, 72 hours, or D, 90 days. The correct answer is C, 72 hours. Question 5. Your emergency kit should include A, first aid kit, B, food and water, C, a whistle, or D, all of the above. The correct answer is D, all of the above. Question 6. A family emergency plan should include A, a meeting spot, B, family contact information, C, health and insurance information, or D, all of the above. correct answer is D, all of the above. All right, how's everybody doing? Good? See, I told you learned something this episode. All right, 5 questions left. Let's keep going. Question 7. Your family emergency plan should not include A, out-of-town contacts, B, neighbors' contact information, C, children's school contact information, or D, your favorite restaurant. I mean, come on. The answer is D. You should know what your favorite restaurant is. Mine is, my mom's watching right now. It's my mom's. Mom's, I love your food. Okay, let's keep going. Question 8. You should know about your municipality's emergency response plan to A, know where to go in the event of a disaster if you have to evacuate your home. B, to get a photo op with your mayor. C, to see a fire truck. Or D, to get your COVID-19 vaccine. Okay, the answer is A, to know where to go in the event of a disaster. But seeing a fire truck, especially with my nieces and nephews, that's always cute. But yeah, no, A is more important. Question 9. How can you find out more about your municipality's emergency response plan? Can you find out by A, visiting the Safe Buildings resources on the Focus Canada website, B, contact your municipality, or C, all of the above? The correct answer is C, all of the above. Question 10. Focus Canada does the following. A, helps the Jamaat and others prepare for emergencies. B, trains volunteers for emergency response. C, provides relief for disasters in different parts of the world. Or D, all of the above. The correct answer is D, all of the above. All right, last question. Question 11. Here it is. Emergency preparedness is important because preparedness can A, save lives and property, B, can help reunify families, C, increase the resiliency of the Jamaat and community, or D, all of the above. The correct answer is D, all of the above. And really, that is what tonight's show is all about, building resiliency, learning, and ensuring that we keep our loved ones safe through a little preparation. And tonight, in lieu of a musical reflection, we have Prince Ali Muhammad's short film, Close to Home. In this 7-minute film, Prince Ali Muhammad traveled to northern Pakistan to meet with some brave communities who have withstood natural disasters for centuries. Inspired by the stories, he wrote and directed his first film, Close to Home, a documentary about the perseverance of this community in the face of natural disasters. Thank you so much for joining us this evening. Thank you for having me. Please stay safe, stay healthy, and Ya Ali Madad.
kitchen وليا أكو موجود بام جگہ میں جاتونی بھائی تو ٹائم لے اچانک کے جھٹکا آواز دیا تیز سن بات मी वापस मेकअप किचन बिल्कुल नाम निशाना नबी
उस वक्त 5-6 बज रहे थे। अचानक के ऊपर से बारिश भी ज़बरदस्त तरीके से हो रही थी। अचानक से ला पाया तो हम इधर से हमारे ये दादिया सारे भाग के और उधर ऊपर से बारिश सर्दी बहुत सर्दी हो रही थी। हम उधर हमने अपना वो मकान वगैरह के सामान वगैरह सिटिंग करके दूसरे टेंट में शिफ्ट होने के लिए। जब हम टेंट में थे तो वहाँ पे बहुत मुश्किल हो रहा था कि हमारी पढ़ाई भी रह गई थी। तकरीबन 1-1.5 महीने हमारी पढ़ाई भी नहीं हो गई, इसलिए वो उधर सर्दी भी बहुत थी, इसलिए हमने गुजारा कर लिया कि सर्दी बर्दाश्त करके।
This whole area is exposed to various kind of natural disasters, be it avalanche, debris flow, flash floods, rockfall, landslide, so you just name those. Our primary goal is to create resilient communities and make their life safe so they can see a better future for themselves in this area.
بس इसका कि suppose mini risker بس زمینی تو ریسک رو لبر تو وز نیو پرنگو بس بنویزی می که پارت بیت بیکار کوی بیک درمز دیا تو سامجو وز دانی قسم بی مونیک سره دیگر خالق زمین پرند ما یا بیزیت یا بدرم زين متاثر واست یا رب سمش فایده نه واست نه زمینی تو خیر خوشک وزن پیدا بدم خون گیت کو تقریبا 40 سال نسوز آدم خون عالم رتبان تم حالت.
Our study shows that in Gilgit-Baltistan and Chitral there are 50 such villages where major part of the village or the community are exposed to various level of hazards. The Aga Khan Agency for Habitat is working with the local communities to come up with a program for the relocation of these high-risk areas.
زمینی شخانی که زمینی نان زيت غاش مشكل لكن زاب فيوتشر دستان زيروش وسطون قربانيان برضوات أتى تمر زرير كي خزمان وفيوتشر دستان زاد ورياشت بكتستان شويت خزمان ور خو مستقبل رفاتر وزياشت كوشش سالن.
The people of northern Pakistan's high mountain regions have faced emergencies like these one after another for centuries. Lives have been lost, homes destroyed, and communities isolated. And yet people persevere and progress. They live with courage and hope in a place of both stunning beauty and the constant risk of danger. I, Ali Aga Khan, traveled to Pakistan and was honored to be able to hear their stories. Their resilience and bravery have inspired me to help document their reality and share their stories. At the Aga Khan Development Network, we have been working with these communities to build infrastructure, including mitigation walls to protect against rockfalls and landslides, bridges to reconnect isolated communities, and seismic-resistant buildings to protect against earthquakes. We have also built temporary shelters and new homes for families impacted by these natural disasters. The young people I spoke with feel a sense of hope and motivation to overcome these challenges. But these are daunting and we need your help. Learn about this region and these issues. Share this video. Follow us for updates about future events and fundraisers. In a world facing an ever-increasing amount of problems due to climate change, it's time to take action. Let us start here in northern Pakistan.